Thank you so much for choosing to tune in today for episode 53 of High Voltage. As always, I'm your host and the only one who's ever on this show, best-selling international author, MacKenzie Nelson. And I'm thrilled that you have invested your time today in this show, which I am titling The Great Reversal, inspired by the story of Esther in the Bible, which in addition to the unjust judge that I talked about from last week, Esther has been the meat and potatoes, so to speak, to sustain me in my own exile from my family. If you want to learn more about the estrangement I have been suffering through for the past 5 years from my entire maternal side of the family, check out my book, My Father's Feathers, A Journey of Transformation and Healing, One Feather at a Time, and check out a bunch of the previous episodes I've recorded on estrangement if you're currently finding yourself in exile as well. There is support for you, and you shouldn't feel shame just because your family chooses to no longer associate with you. And I'm all about walking in freedom, and one of the ways God has taught me how to do that is through the amazing story of Esther. If you're not familiar, I'll give you a quick synopsis. The story of Esther, we find her in exile. She is an orphan, and she's a Jew living in Persia with a lot of her people during the Babylonian exile who've gotten pushed into Persia, which was taken over by the Persians. And so here she is living, no parents, an orphan. She's being raised by her uncle, Mordecai. Meanwhile, in Persia, in the royal empire, King Xerxes has decided to host a fabulous banquet. I'm talking the nines, right? He's rolling out the dinnerware, the purple attire, all the royal who's of the kingdom have been invited. And while they're throwing back some wine, you can just see these guys hanging out. The women are inside. Queen Vashti is like beautiful, and she's known for her beauty in the land. And I can just picture them talking like, man, you gotta get your wife out here. Let's show her off a little bit. She's as stunning as you say. Let's get her out here. So Xerxes sends a messenger and says, hey, I'd like to see you. Because back in those times, the queen could only come to the king when he summoned her, and he summoned her and was like, he wants you to show off your beauty. And she sends a reply back to Xerxes saying, no, I'm not coming. Like, I'm not down with that, and you could just see her with like all of the royal wives being like, good for you, girl. You don't have to go do that, Well, he was angry. The king was so angry, and everyone around him was like, you can't let this go on because our wives are going to start saying no to us, and we cannot establish that. We're in charge, so we got to tell him what's up. So this led to a national beauty competition to replace Vashti, which I don't think Xerxes was too happy about. I think he really liked Queen Vashti, but he felt like caught between a hard place. Like, if I don't do this and I don't put her in her place, I'm just never going to hear the end of it, from everyone in the kingdom about how I didn't stand up to her. So they literally comb the land of Persia looking for fair maidens, these beautiful women, right? And they go out, they recruit them, they bring them back to the palace, and then they undergo several beauty treatments. And Esther was one of these recruits. So they are basically this harem, right, of women who are specifically there just to serve the king. And he summons them for one night. And they are able to pick out the accessories they want to wear and everything when they present themselves to the king when they're summoned. And they might just see him this one night and then never again. And they're living their whole lives. These women are living their whole lives, in this celibate state with these other women just forever because they were with the king once. So now they can't go on to marry or anything, which I find so fascinating. Anyways, back to our story after that sidebar. Basically, so she finally gets summons to see the king. Her uncle Mordecai also happens, to be working at the palace, which is awesome too, right? So at least she's there with her uncle. And she chooses and has the favor of one of the eunuchs that is in charge of all of the women. And she chooses much more simpler accessories than a lot of the other women chose. And sees the king, he loves her and is taken with her and kicks Vashti to the curb and marries Esther. So now Esther is the queen of Persia, but no one knows, right, that she's a Jew. They're all assuming she's a Persian, but she is a Jew, and only Mordecai, the other Jew, her uncle that raised her, knows her secret. Well, a series of events take place. Haman, who is a minister to the king, he is an official there. He's a Persian. And, it was custom back in this day that everyone would bow when Haman walked by, or the king, anyone official, everyone bowed to them. But Mordecai, Esther's uncle, did not bow to him one day. He just stood. And this is not really explained in the story of Esther, why he didn't choose to bow. However, it really, really, really made Haman angry. This was the spark, right, to flip Haman. And he's like, I don't just want to take out Mordecai, I want to take out all the Jews, because he knew Mordecai was a Jew living in Persia. So he basically goes and gets something written out and stamped by the king, a proclamation that all of the Jews are to be murdered in Persia. And word gets back to Esther that, what am I going to do? And basically the thing that has always stuck with me about this story is perhaps, you were put in this position as Queen Esther for such a time as this. This is your time to shine. This is the moment. And I just am floored thinking and putting myself in Esther's shoes. To go to the king without a summons, without him extending the royal scepter, could mean death to her. And Mordecai, her uncle, comes to her and is like, you gotta do something. Perhaps, you're queen for such a time as this. And she looks at her uncle and she's like, if I perish, I perish. If I approach the king and I die, so be it. I'm gonna trust God. And she fasted for 3 days and prayed about it. And she trusted God as she approached the king. There's a lot more to this story, so read the book of Esther. I'm kind of skipping over a lot and trying to touch on the main points. But if you're interested, read it. It is so worth your time. Even if you've heard it, maybe in Sunday school or church, reading the actual story is so much different. So I challenge you to go and do that after you watch this show, if you're interested. So basically, Esther, is received by the king after approaching him, to her great relief. And she tells King Xerxes, she's like, I would like to invite you and Haman to a banquet, a private banquet. And Haman's like, yippity skippity, like, how honored am I? I'm just going to be hanging out with, the queen, Esther, and I am going to be hanging out with King Xerxes, just the three of us. And he goes home and he's like, bragging to his wife, like, look at me, I am climbing the ranks. Esther wants me at a banquet. And the wife and all his friends are basically like, okay, now here's your chance to get back at Mordecai. What you need to do is construct a really high structure with a noose on the end of it. And then you're going to tell the king that you want Mordecai to hang from it. So we're going to kill Mordecai along with all of the Jews. And you clearly have his favor because he's inviting you to this banquet. He goes to the first banquet and not much is said at this banquet, which is why they're like, let's build the noose. You have all this favor. But then Esther invites them to a second banquet. And this time she reveals her true identity as a Jew to the king. Like, the bravery to do this at this time with this, command to kill all Jews. She's putting her own life in peril in so many ways. And basically the king is outraged by this, and he reverses, everything that Haman had put out to destroy the Jews, to eradicate them from Persia. And he proclaims this as a day for the Jews to actually take back everything. He reverses the order, and Esther frees all of the Jews from this and herself. And basically Haman is hung. And he also goes and kills Haman's 10 sons, not just Haman, but his entire lineage is eradicated on the same noose that he constructed to kill Mordecai. So basically, the moral of the story is, God's not mentioned really in this book. And that's another highlight of the book of Esther. He's not directly mentioned. However, I think this is a great story, and it's a reminder that when God seems absent, right, in our lives, in our circumstances, he does not abandon his people. He never abandons you, not for a minute. Even if he seems silent or you feel like he's not speaking as loudly over your life, he works in our lives and he stays faithful to his promises, even when we are in the midst of exile, which I currently am. I am in exile, right? I am cut off from my maternal family, from a lot of family. I do not have practically any family support at this point. I talk to my dad every now and then, who's going through cancer. He's got his own battles he's fighting right now. My children don't have that, family support. My in-laws come and they support us. They show up at cross-country races, but it's not the same as my own mom, my sister, my brother, who could be coming and supporting me and my family. And I'm reminded of this in so many ways on birthdays, separate occasions. My sister had a 40th birthday party. I've already spoken about this in a previous episode if you want to check that out, where I showed up at the same time as all of my family at the same small restaurant locally here in Peoria. And they were there celebrating her 40th birthday. And I was at a table by the window with a really good friend at a happy hour. And I had to witness their whole celebration in isolation, in exile, at the table over. It was so painful, and still is one of the things when I think back on this, still, kind of gets caught in my throat. Well, here's a new I guess you would say continuation of that story. So her birthday was back. This all happened back in May. And last month, I go to the same restaurant at the same time to meet a different friend for happy hour. And my sister walks in again with her husband. And Ivy is a pastor. She's a pastor and her husband. They walk in at the same time. I'm face to face. But she didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything because honestly, I feel at this place in time, as I have continued to speak out, they know my story. They were there. They know what happened, and they're choosing to ignore me and to keep me in a state of exile. So basically, I heard her ask if there was another table because they went to seat her at the same table I was at the last time they were there celebrating her birthday. And they said, no, this is the only table available. So she was sad. What a reversal, right? So here she is sitting at the same table. And that just spoke to me. It spoke to me. I felt God be like, I've been talking to you, MacKenzie, about, you can call it karma, call it what you will, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That is truly the commitment I've made in my life. And am I perfect? No. And I will never proclaim to be. But I strive every single day to be the best version of myself, not just for me, my family, and my friends, but for the general public. I try my very hardest to offer people my heart, my kindness, my love, my money, whatever I have, I give freely because I don't expect anything in return because I know God's got my back. I know no matter what I do, I've given things away my entire life, even as a child, even when I was homeless in my early 20s, I just gave freely. I always have. But as I've become closer with God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit, I rely on them completely. When I give something to someone, there's nothing else I am looking for. It's not a tit for tat. It's not maybe if I do this for this person, they'll do it for me. No, I expect God to have my back always. So what does that do? It frees me to give of myself, my talents, my money, my everything that I have every day. I am running this race. And that looks different every day depending on, what's coming up, how I feel. What's happening in my life. But every day, although my efforts and things may look a little different on a daily basis, my heart's the same. And I'm going to give freely of myself to the world, to whoever he calls me to, without expectation that they will return it to me, because that is not people's responsibility, and that is not the heart of Christ. Jesus gave freely of himself to the earth, to people, and expected God to replenish him, to give him strength, give him resources. And he did. He will fill you until you are overflowing. If you give something with a heart of kindness and meaning to help someone, and you have a pure heart about it, God is going to return that to you. So you don't have to live your life like, well, I was very generous, with my friend Sam the other day. And, every time I need something, he's never stepping up. So why would I be generous with him again? And it's like, that's not God's heart. It's, you know what? I give freely to this person, and they just take. That's something to pray into to God. Maybe he just had that person for a little while in your life to give some things to. And because you're not in prayer about it, you stay tethered in this unhealthy relationship where you're giving, getting taken. That's not what he has for you either. Every person's situation and relationship is different, and he wants you to pray about it. He might have you invest in someone's life for a short period, then pull you out. He might not have you invest at all and say, hey, I have someone else for that person. I don't have you there. And when you try to go and impact situations and circumstances that he doesn't have for you, it's chaos and you're not fulfilled in those places. But when you plug into the people that he has for you for the amount of time that he has specified that he has for you, and you give freely and you pull back when he calls you to, you're done, right? Sometimes he has you minister to people that are very difficult, but he won't keep you there forever because he wants you to have peace as well. And then you can see on the back end where he'll come through for you financially time and time again. The more you give, the more you will get back from him. But we cannot place that expectation on people. That is for God. And then that frees you from the tit for tat mentality, which I don't have. I have freedom. I can be who I am. I can bless people's lives as he calls me to. And then I just wait for him to replenish my storehouses. And I don't put that on people. So I'm free to stay in good relationships with them. All right, guys, just keep praying into your situations, into your circumstances, inspired by Esther. People who are looking to get you with the get you mentality or strategizing or playing games with you. When you look to God and you plug into that lifeline and you talk to him about your life, there's always 100%, you are guaranteed a great reversal. I hope you have a great weekend and feel so inspired by this show, and I will catch you next week. Thanks again.